Now, to discuss some of our top stories is Dr. Marek Laskowitz, who joins us via Zoom from London. Good evening, Dr. Marek. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us on Arise America.
Good evening.
Now, President Donald Trump is seemingly losing his patience and has said that the UK will take a pause on mediating Ukraine peace talks. Let's talk about how that can shift in America's engagement might affect the balance of power between Moscow and Kyiv on the battlefield and at the negotiating table as well.
On the battlefield, were America to withdraw, as Donald Trump is suggesting, it would mean that Russia has victory in its sights, a military victory. And this is obviously good for Russia, which is why it has had no response at all to what Donald Trump has said, because if he withdraws, that's good for Russia. If he manages to negotiate with Russia a favorable peace term, and that is what Russia wants, well, Russia wins that way too. So it's a win-win situation for them as things stand. It therefore follows that Putin's offer of an Easter ceasefire was only, if you like, a sop for the publicity. It's a PR stunt. It's not very important. The fighting will resume. As for President Donald Trump, on the one hand, yes, he's got other things to do. Yes, he doesn't want to put any more money into Ukraine. Yes, it's not his war, but it is his war in the sense that Russia is a global nuclear power. And were it to expand, it would head for World War III, as I've indicated in my books, because this actually fits the prophecy I was saying that Russia would be a winner in such a war with Ukraine and would then carry on. It would also show him to be somewhat of a weak man because he stresses that he doesn't like fighting. There's a problem here. How is he going to keep peace if he is not prepared to fight? He's not indicating that he, in this case, is the sort of strong leader which the Russians fear, like they feared, for example, George W. Bush in the crisis many years ago, about 20 years ago now, when he sent Colin Powell over to tell the Russians that either they leave Ukraine or he is prepared to fight. This is not the case with Donald Trump, and therefore Russia, it's a good time for Russia, not so good for Ukraine.
Why is this problem? It seems over the years, it continues to shift from from Ukraine and Russia to America. Why is this an American problem as opposed to a Chinese problem, a British problem? Why is this America's problem to solve?
Good question. The reason is because America is the leading military power, and what it decides is actually the key outcome militarily and therefore diplomatically. Please note, America spends more money on its arms than the combined 10 nations after it, up till the war itself. And therefore, America is simply so powerful that any global issue, anything at all, it doesn't have to be Ukraine, it can be in Gaza, it can be in Iran, it can be anywhere, Taiwan, and America is automatically involved, and to that extent, it is a problem. But it's not only America's problem. It is, of course, Europe's problem, UK's, because according to my predictions, Russia will carry on expanding westwards because this will now give it an opportunity to win. It therefore follows that it is also Britain, Europe's problem, but they can do very little about this. Sure, they can do a coalition of the willing. Sure, they can send some money to Ukraine, but it's simply not in USA's league in the quality of the military hardware or in the amount of the military hardware. Europe just isn't rich enough or well developed enough militarily for that. And it gets slightly worse. The central problem is that Britain and Europe, by talking about sending a reassuring force over on the Ukrainian frontier with Russia, the moment there is a true peace treaty, is of course the very thing that Russia doesn't want. And therefore it follows that Europe, far from helping bring about a peace treaty, is actually hindering it to that extent. So the answer is, it is automatically America's problem, but it is also other people's. And the question is America going to actually try to solve it anymore? And it would appear the answer is no, because it is most unlikely that both sides can reach any sort of agreement in the next few days.
Well, we hope that they surprise us and come to some sort of agreement. Now, was Trump drawing a hard red line on Iran's nuclear ambitions just days before talks in Rome? Is this rhetoric likely to strengthen the U.S.'s position or risk derailing already fragile diplomatic efforts Also, do you think the president's stance is justified as far as Iran is concerned?
Well, the third part is actually the most interesting because here we have a very clear case of what is virtually nuclear apartheid. It's okay for Great Britain and France and Russia and China and Pakistan, please note, its neighbor, to have nuclear weapons, and India, whilst we're at it, and Israel, but not Iran. Well, the Iranians obviously see themselves as they once were 2,500 years ago, as a very important nation and don't like that. Number two, they are quite clear that they want to be a player on the global stage and that therefore they do not want their ambitions clipped. They would be prepared, I think, to make some sort of deal, and therefore it is maybe possible if America gives enough economic sweetmeats, if you like. But there is a problem. Iran, if were it to agree to any such treaty, would automatically be out of it. Therefore, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syria, its former client states, are therefore no longer her as an ally. Russia also doesn't therefore have Iran as an ally, presumably, which is why Iran, please note, went to Russia for talks. Because you see, in these talks with America, Iran can quite clearly see that it really needs Russian support. And interestingly, Russia has spoken to Iran, and therefore we've yet to see what emerges out of this. Please remember that during the Cold War, the Muslim countries, the Arab world on the whole, was on Russia's side, and Israel, of course, was on America's, and was sort of moving dangerously close once more to a Cold War scenario, which in this case would be a hot war, namely World War III, were it to develop along these lines. So we hope that some sort of compromise can be found, but it does look unlikely, judging by what Iran has been saying.
So earlier you mentioned that Putin's surprise truce announcement was a PR stunt. What other underlying messages do you think he may be trying to pass with this, and how do you foresee this playing out internationally?
The key point about the Russians, because President Putin in this sense is no different from many other Russian leaders, is they do not react quickly. They are cautious. They're like, indeed, a huge bear, come to that. And therefore, what they are going to see from Russia is that it carefully looks after its interests. Hence, there's no possibility in the next few days of a real agreement, a real peace treaty with Ukraine. You'll also see that slowly they're waking up to the fact that if America is now no longer exactly anti them, they have opportunities. And thirdly, the Muslim world is beckoning. That's why, if you look carefully, President Putin also said he praised Hamas for releasing some hostages. An interesting comment to praise Hamas for that. It all indicates that Russia and indeed the Muslim world may well be going for a realignment. We do hope not, but this is the key point. Remember, there are no fireworks from Russia, and even this brief Easter ceasefire is really of no consequence, which is why he offered it.
Saying that there is no truce at all and that people should be skeptical as they already are.
Yes, that's right. You see, these ceasefires, they literally do not change anything. It actually is worse than that. You see, it gives an opportunity to regroup. It gives an opportunity to resupply the troops. Broadly speaking, a ceasefire can be very, very useful for the aggressor, which in this case Russia is. And as I indeed indicated in my books, and therefore what will happen, therefore, is that Russia will now see an opportunity to move forward, but they won't do much until America formally goes away. They're really waiting for Donald Trump to say, yes, I've had enough of these negotiations, and then they can do something. So therefore, what we're going to see is very little action as such immediately. But as soon as Donald Trump turns his back, yes, they can be at it then. But the key point is whether Donald Trump will turn his back, because if Iran aligns with Moscow, as is being indicated, that would be a problem for Donald Trump.
Okay. So regardless of whatever motives the Russians have, Ukrainian forces are agreeing to observe the truce. How will this impact the morale on the front lines, and how will it affect the lives of the citizens?
A brief respite from bombing is, of course, very important for the Ukrainians. But on top of that, there probably won't be that much bombing anyway for the next few days, whilst Putin waits to see what Donald Trump does. As for the troops, it gives them a chance for a rest, because after all, there's been 3 years of grinding war. So the regrouping also can benefit Ukraine to that extent. So in that sense, it's good. Moreover, they might be able to ship in more goods from Europe, which are, of course, always helpful, from Great Britain or Germany. This is also helpful to them. Unfortunately, the ceasefire works more for the bigger side than for the smaller side, in which case the ceasefire is actually more beneficial to Russia than Ukraine.
Russia has the upper hand in this situation. I was really hoping that this ceasefire announcement would open the door to longer-term negotiations. From your predictions and your analysis, it's not seeming very likely, but I'm still going to hold out hope for the best. Thank you very much, Dr. Marek, for joining us on Arise America. It's always a pleasure to have you.